As bad faith Republicans threaten to destroy our economy and unleash vengeful congressional investigations, President Biden's competent top advisor will reportedly resign after February's State of the Union. So this story is a bit of a bummer, not just for the Biden administration, but I would argue for the country as a whole, because President Biden's chief of staff, his top advisor, Ron Klain, who's been in that role for 2 years, will reportedly resign after the State of the Union address in February. And to really break down why this news sucks, it's understandable. I guess it was kind of predictable and long overdue, but it sucks is I guess we really got to dive into the role of the chief of staff, because if you're a politics geek, you hear that phrase quite a bit, chief of staff, chief of staff. And I guess it's kind of self-explanatory, but not really, because there's so much more to this position than just the supervisory element of the White House. So there's a great book by Chris Whipple called The Gatekeepers. It's one of my favorite political nonfiction books, and it's about the White House chief of staff role. And it covers, I think, all the way from H.R. Haldeman under President Nixon, all the way up to, I think, Reince Priebus, or the first one or two White House chiefs of staff under President Trump, because the book was published, I think, in late 2017. So it's 5 years old. I mean, it didn't encompass the rest of the Trump administration or the Biden administration thus far, but it's a really good book, and it interviews and discusses, this role under various presidents, how it evolved, how it regressed, how it mutated again, how various presidents had different ideas of what the role would entail. And the central thesis of the book is that a president's success is arguably shaped by what they conceive of the White House chief of staff and who they put in that role. Basically, they say that it's the single most important decision that a president can make, is figuring out who will occupy this role. And if you read the book, you find out that there's a lot to it. And if you really think of the past 2 years under President Biden, I would say that thesis is confirmed, because since August or September of 2021, it is true that President Biden's approval rating has been relatively low, still higher than Trump's for the most part, but not as high as it was when he started. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at his win-loss sheet, like legislatively and politically, Biden has racked up like an alphabet soup worth of W's, just W after W after W, starting with the American Rescue Plan, which saved us from a double-digit recession, added like 4 million jobs a year earlier than most economists expected, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, the PACT Act, all these things which happened because of President Biden's leadership and Democratic control of Congress. Ron Klain was involved with all of that. I mean, they say his fingerprints were all over it in terms of the negotiation, in terms of setting the negotiating strategy, the administrative strategy. And so he has played an immensely consequential role. But the role of White House chief of staff is essentially, as one guy, Claude Taylor, put it on Twitter, he says, a lot will be said about Ron Klain's tenure as White House chief of staff, but basically he was the chief operating officer of the U.S. for 2 years and did the job very well. So if the president is the CEO, the chief executive officer, the chief operating officer is typically the person responsible for like the day-to-day minutia of running a company. It's considered the second in command in the corporate C-suite. And that was basically Ron Klain. If you're a Game of Thrones geek like I am, Ron Klain as chief of staff was basically the hand of the king. Okay, that's how powerful this role is. It's seen as the second most powerful role in Washington, and the worst job in Washington, D.C., they say. I mean, the stress is inordinate. Dick Cheney, President Bush's vice president, the guy who was seen as the Darth Vader and the power behind the throne of the Bush administration, he said that, because he was White House chief of staff under President Ford, that it was the most stressful job he ever had, and it contributed to his first heart attack. Like, the turnover rate for chiefs of staff are incredibly high. You look at the Trump administration, you had Reince Priebus for 192 days, General Kelly for 1 year and 154 days, Mick Mulvaney as acting chief of staff made it 1 year, 89 days, Mark Meadow 295 days, but Klain beats them all. He's had the greatest tenure, the longest tenure of any White House chief of staff under any Democratic president, with 2 years and 1 day as of now. And you'll probably add 30 more to it, assuming that he resigns sometime in February. So it's a role with enormous turnover. They typically don't last 4 years, right? They don't last as long as presidents because it's seen as so stressful, this job where you're the top advisor, you're the gatekeeper, you're the supervisor of the White House staff, you're a negotiator with Congress. You wear so many hats. You're a cabinet level position, right? You're in the situation room with the president. It's such a locus of stress and responsibility, and you wear so many hats. So kudos to Ron Klain for making it this long and this far. But yeah, as Axios reports, and of course they condense the information, he plans to depart after the State of the Union address in February once his successor is firmly in place, according to an administration official. Why it matters. Klain has been one of the most consequential chiefs of staff in the modern presidency, and his departure will deprive President Biden of a trusted advisor who knows both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, which is where the White House is. And the timing of this... we'll get into it. This has been discussed and rumored to be happening since the midterms of 2022, right? So before the document scandal and all this stuff, before Republicans took the House, Ron Klain has been reportedly debating about leaving the role. Again, as White House chiefs of staff do. The fact that he made it this long is extraordinary. So this is nothing, it's not a spur of the moment. Some people on Twitter are like, oh my God, this is a sign that the Biden administration's a sinking ship. Well, no, he's been talking about it since November, right? So it's a 3 or 4 month old situation. But the timing of it does suck because now you have Republicans, however slim, they control the House of Representatives. They're preparing to unleash one investigation after another into Hunter Biden, into Afghanistan, now into the classified documents situation. They smell blood in the water, and they are going to do everything in their power to hobble the Biden administration and hurt him politically. And not to mention the debt ceiling crisis, right? As long as Republicans refuse to play ball there, we are heading with increasing speed towards a national default. And Klain, as the White House chief of staff, is enormously competent, enormously successful, so it kind of sucks he's not going to be around to kind of, play a role in managing these crises. But yeah, so Biden has tried to persuade Klain to stay, and the White House officials have privately suggested that he is irreplaceable. And if you look at his background, you would understand why. I mean, he served as Biden's chief of staff when Biden was vice president. He was President Obama's Ebola czar, so he was responsible for managing and crushing that Ebola crisis that you may not remember, and the reason you don't remember it is because Ron Klain was on the job. He is seen as enormously competent, a consumer of vast amounts of information. He's like up at 4 a.m. every day looking into gas prices and keeping track of national security briefs and whatnot. I mean, he's just a machine. Also, which is interesting about Klain is that he's also found the time to be a prolific tweeter, right? So he also understands that outside of the press secretary, right? So Karine Jean-Pierre now, and it used to be Jen Psaki, the White House chief of staff can have a visible role, which typically they don't, right? They're again, usually just the administrative power in the White House, and you have more public-facing people like the press secretary. But Klain, who is funny and charismatic and relatively young, he's only 61, he understands the power of social media. So he has quite a prolific following on Twitter, and he uses it with great skill. See if I can pull it up here. White House Chief of Staff. Yeah, I mean, pretty good for a government official who isn't like, the president. 591,000 followers. He tweets prolifically, news and updates and accomplishments about the Biden administration. So he's basically been like, I don't know, like the coach and the head cheerleader all in one. It's been a really impressive job. And it kind of sucks, again, that he's just not going to be around to help weather these crises. And it will be interesting to see who the White House taps to try to fill his position. The upshot is, unlike any other cabinet role, so the Secretary of State, Secretary of Transportation, and whatnot, the White House Chief of Staff, which is arguably more powerful than any of them, doesn't require Senate confirmation, right? So whereas if Biden wanted to get a new Secretary of State, he would have to get advice and consent from the Senate, right? Like he had to do with the current Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. But if and when Klain resigns from the White House Chief of Staff role, Biden can appoint whoever he wants, and the Senate can't say shit about it. I mean, they can, but they can't stop it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Again, kudos to Ron Klain. But whoever takes his place is going to have some big shoes to fill. Hey, you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.